Thank you so much, Eve. That was riveting stuff and a lot to chew on. We just have about 20 minutes, but just to say that I couldn't agree more about the centrality of impartiality above, everything else. I mean, that will become the distinguishing factor, I agree, in discerning who is a humanitarian actor. And I think we need to remember that as we engage with the diversity of actors that exist out there. And in HPG, we're great fans of, context-specific everything. So I couldn't agree more with you on that. And supporting staff has been, a big sort of long bone here, especially in crisis, staff operating in crisis, returning from crisis, investing in people that we deploy in very challenging circumstances, having, the robustness behind the headquarters that is really critical. So great stuff. I'm ready to take questions from the audience. I see a hand out there. Yes. Can you please identify who you are and if you belong to an organization?
I'm sorry to be the first, but I appreciated your comments on the landscape and the way you dismissed the concept of sector. I much appreciated that as well.
Can you please identify yourself?
And I think you gave views of the landscape, what was nice about it, what was nasty about it, a little bit about the landscape on the surface. My question would be, what is underneath the surface? What is the geomorphology, if I may use that as a metaphor? What are the forces underneath which shape the landscape that you were looking at from above? Thank you.
I'll take two or three, and then I'll come back to you.
Hi, Anna Tammy from MSF. So my question is, to what extent do you think that the landscape that you've been describing is changing in terms of needs, humanitarian needs, and what implications do you think that has for humanitarian actors? And I'm thinking specifically, for instance, context of urban violence that might be in middle-income countries, but where needs might be just as bad as in any war context. Thanks.
Thank you. Anybody else immediately? No, do you want to take this? Oh, Sorsha, okay.
I just asked the question.
I think you need the mic for the online audience.
We've been sitting in the HPG's advisory group, and one of the themes of today has been the history of humanitarian action. The history. And I've been really interested at the prominence that the Red Cross has had, the Japanese Red Cross, the French Red Cross, the ICRC. And, we know how much the system, the sector, the landscape has learnt from the Red Cross. And you can say the principles are something that the Red Cross has given in some way or has been taken from the work of the Red Cross. If you look, say, 30 years ahead, what do you think will the Red Cross be providing to the landscape of the system? And do you see the Red Cross playing the same leadership role that it's played in the past in the current landscape?
Great. Do you want to start with that?
With pleasure. Yeah, I would maybe start with the last question. I think in 20 years, I hope what the Red Crescent will, I don't know if it will give to the landscape, let's put it that way. I hope in 20 years we will not use landscape anymore. Maybe we'll have a different, no, but possibly it will have a different dynamic, but let's call it a landscape so far. I hope we will be able to, I don't know if it's learned, but pass two things. One is the obsession to be close to people, the proximity. I think the proximity will go back to be. So big business model, if I may say, or model, will be challenged. And I think the one won't really being able to bring this in their model will suffer. So I hope proximity, face-to-face, the ability to really discuss with all parties, with all the problems. I think this is something that the Red Cross, I hope, will be able to bring at the table. The second point is, I hope, but that's the way it is, and it leads to your questions from MSF, is the ability to come and to make peace. I thought some of you have done it already, I know, and move out of this constant debate of what is humanitarian and what is development, right? And maybe, I know it's an important debate, I'm not saying it's not, but in a way, in terms of response, that we are able to play with the different tools, the different competencies, and being much more relaxed in order to adapt ourselves to the reality of the people. I think, and that links to your questions, I think the issue I see, not so much I can see the urban, the rural. I think it's a major issue. But I think for me the big question is about, it's really what constitutes an emergency. Frankly, what constitutes an emergency, and where do you move into something else than an emergency? And you know what? I'm concerned. I'm not only concerned about the people, I'm also concerned about my own organization. Because I think as an organization, the Red Cross and the ICS specifically, we are still in a way constructed, including in our identity, as an emergency organization. We like it. We're very good. When emergency arrive, we like it. We're good. We jack, boom. We do it very well. And this, how we attract people, because they think they will do emergency, not because they want to stay for a few years, you know, waiting an emergency happen, right? But interestingly enough, if I look at my own organization, I would say at least 75% of operation are not into an emergency mode. And it's not new. This is something we have to adapt our response much more today. And what I found interesting is, and to respond to your question, is the issue I really look into that is how are we able to have the right competencies, the right structure, the right understanding, being able to at the same time really respond to chronicle issues, chronicle needs, and you know that very well, and at the same time scaling up when there are problems of emergency on both sides. I really see it as still a major problem, right, as an organization and as a group and as a community. Let's talk about community now, not as a landscape. I really do think that that's a major issue. Much more, I understand the urban, the rural, yes, I can see that, but I think we will make it. I still think the big questions for me is the ability to adopt within one organization, because I don't think it will be just, you know, you do emergency and I do early recovery. It won't work. And we've seen that. And the other issues that links me, if I may just try to answer, maybe the third point is, maybe we will move also to a world where we will have again, not multi-mandated organization, but multi-sectorial organization. That you don't look at the world through only one issue. Maybe we'll be back to within organization, having the ability within the organization to bring together different competences. Complicated, I know. Why? Because this is the only way then to be able to do deal, and deal not negative, positive deal, to try to find the right response. If you are serious about being contextualized, you maybe need within your organization, or at least within your federation or your group, to have enough competencies in order to build different response. If you look at the world through only one prism, there's always a risk that you will respond to what you think is the problem, because you look it through that. So maybe to look at that. On the landscape, it's a long questions, and Sarah, you know, told me don't do more than 2 hours. So it would be. I think if we go down, I think we can discuss a lot about issues. I think it links with the world, with what is happening right now in the world in terms of political landscape changing. I mean, if we talk about landscape, I mean, we need to look at what is happening in the world right now. I think that's very clear. And I think the humanitarian landscape is not different from the world. I don't think so. I think we are affected by the same, maybe not the same time, but some of the same questions. All, and rightly so, all the fact that we are now pushing ahead and saying that the local response is not better, but sometimes better placed than the national and the international response makes a lot of sense. But then, as always, it's the risk is we have a tendency, and not so surprised, then to go for one options and forget the rest of the complexity. And I think what seems for me very clear is, in the ideal, is we should be able to, even within the landscape, find a way to bring together the different elements of that, right? I would say. But yes, the landscape is affected by the world, absolutely. I really don't see any differences. I don't think that we are immune from the political problems and the social issues and the economic issue. On the contrary, I don't think so.
Thanks, Yves. See a lot of hands go, and I have 2 questions from the online audience as well. So I'll take 4 or 5 perhaps, but please be brief. Yeah. A couple of questions from our online audience. Lucy James, a researcher at Cambridge University, asks, does Mr. Dacour think that his coordination model for humanitarian organizations should extend to host governments? And she refers to the Sudanese government in the case of Darfur specifically. And another question from Martin Gilbraith, president of ICA International. What does Mr. Dacour regard as the key skills the humanitarian leaders of tomorrow will need? The key skills that humanitarian leaders of tomorrow will need. And I had Dennis Oistin, Dr. O, and I'll take a couple of others, and then we'll go back to Yves.
gap. You didn't mention much about protection, but I would suggest that the gap in our collective response in the last decade has been a failure to protect civilians in conflicts. Not incidental casualties, but targeted casualties, both by governments and non-state actors. From Sri Lanka to Pakistan to Afghanistan to Eastern Congo to South Central Somalia to Kordofan, Blue Nile, you know the list, and Syria. It's the raison d'etre of ICRC, protection of civilians in conflict. And IHL has been ignored with impunity. It has no sanctions. The moral authority of IHL has been eroded, I would suggest. Do you think there's a need for some form of sanction? Because it's not working. The system doesn't work, and we are seeing increased atrocities with impunity against civilians.
Thanks, Dennis. Oystein and then Dr.
Hi. My name is Oystein Lyngroth from Norway. I have a question. You had a few interesting comments, observations on the cluster system. If we think back since 2005, a lot has happened with the cooperation and the clusters, etc. And to the better, I would say, since the tsunami, etc. But there are obvious challenges. We see them in Syria, Haiti, etc. It's interesting to hear also that you think that ICRC have some challenges with regard to coordination. When you say that, do you also have a plan what will you do to change it? I mean, you are a major actor, you are very principled, you work in conflict mainly, but it's interesting to hear what is your take on it. And also a similar question. Cluster system is a global structure and it needs some agreement among the key stakeholders. You will participate in the IAC principals meeting next week. What will you say to Valerie Amos? She has tried to change the cluster system, tried to strengthen it, and now you say that it is all kind of, it is not working. What is the constructive approach to this?
Thank you. And Dr. Owen, I'll come back to you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'm Mr. Oh, from the South Korea, and I'm working in the KOICA as a health research officer. Yeah, I think you said I think the humanitarian landscape is the characteristic of the diversity. Yeah, now it's so many organization and private and public and civil NGO, social enterprises working in the humanitarian group. I think you said we need just one common principle. However, I think that there are so many diversity groups. So private sectors, they have their principle, or public sectors they have their principle. As long as the principle is helpful for the vulnerable people, I think that there are so many principles to the engages. What do you think about it? Yeah.
Eve, nice collection of questions.
So the first question was no, my response. The second one, yes. The third one was yes. I agree with you, Dennis. Now, if I come on the first, on Sudan, the government, no, my message was really about humanitarian landscape. I don't think, of course, the government are central, and we have to find ways, and of course, Syria is a good example, Sudan is a very good example, there is no other issues than to find a contextualized response, very clearly, but let's be very clear, they should not be at the center of our response. We need to deal with them, but so how do we apply the contextualized dynamic, yes. But for me, it was not just for the government, if I understand that. On the key skill for humanitarian, there will be a long list, but maybe one thing to propose to you is sagacity. You know? Is it working in English, sagacity? Yes, it is working. You know? sagacity, you know. It means, no, because the risk we have, I can see some, no, I'm trying to explain. The risk we do have as an organ, it's normal as a landscape. We are professionalizing ourselves a lot, right? I think to be able to balance all the expertise, to make sense of it, you need to have people who are able to you know, to be able, first of all, to know themselves well, but then to be able to have a minimum of sagacity. No, you don't. Astute, you say? Yeah, okay. Do you understand astute? Okay. Sagacité, je dirais en français, en anglais. Astute. Oh my God, it's coming. Astute, so, right? Very good.
Works in Italian.
Which means, no, but really, I'm saying that people able to also, the risk is otherwise, humanitarian will be flooded by rules, by guidelines. It's true and it's normal. We have to be careful with that. We have to give, it's not a question of power, because guidelines, it's not a problem. It's never an issue if you have too many guidelines. It's the ability to sometimes cross the guideline and to do something different, right? And you need not to have crazy people, but astute people. Very good. Okay, I get that's, if there's one skill, that's something I would really push. Then is on IHL and protection. Yeah, I totally agree, and I think I have a slight different element. For me, I think, let's be very honest, we are trying to protect. We should be humble about that. I don't think, just let's be very honest, I think. And even, by the way, ICRC is not only about civilian. Let's also remember, we are also very interested about what is happening to soldiers. Really. Civilian are very important for us, but we are also interested about what's happening to the people fighting. But your point about sanction, yes, no doubt on that one. I mean, there's famous comparison with road, you know. I think you certainly know there is a lot of research done that road traffic is one of the most violent human behavior, right? Surprisingly enough, people are ready to kill, which surprises me always, very aggressive, whatever. We all know that if you say it cannot just be knowledge, we know that. We know it's not enough. Education is not enough. People are aware that it should not drive like that, whatever. It's about sanction. It's education and sanction. So it's very true that on international humanitarian law, I think we will have to move one step further, if not two. And honestly with you, I found these days very painful, but I'm optimistic over time. On sanction. But then we'll have to move to another system. And here it's a call. At least these days, if the international justice continue to spot only one place of the world and not the rest, then we have a real problem, right? Let's start to be slightly less, I would say, one-sided. I think that's a problem. Now, my view is, I think the difference will happen at the national level. It will take time, and the pressure of the international level, the both. It will take time, and I know it's very frustrating right now. And sanction is absolutely critical. No discussion on that. And making sure that, for example, in each country, you have, and we have moved already for a long time at the ICRC, Dutch moving from what we call dissemination of international humanitarian law to something much more direct, where we are willing that within the doctrine of army, for example, but also non-state armed group, they have a system where they sanction, because we know this is the best way to impact people. But we're far, but my sense is I'm slightly more optimistic. It's painful, it's difficult, but I think along the way, I'm still of the opinion that the world, the way we are connected, the way we're going through, I think people accept less, maybe I'm wrong, a bit less suffering. We'll have to look into that, but sanction, yes, no doubt on that one. On the cluster, sorry, I didn't want to criticize the cluster. So I think the cluster are fantastic. Works very well. No, but just my message to you is also, one thing you have to know, if I may just, one thing very clearly at the ICRC, we are engaging. Our point is not to look and say the cluster are doing bad. We are absolutely engaging. And I'm absolutely of the opinion, for example, that Valérie does her best. Frankly, I think she does her best. But let's also agree, please, and that's nothing to do with a cluster, but let's agree that if we think that one model of coordination can be applied constantly everywhere, then we have a problem. And that's the problem of the cluster. There's a few other problems, but let's say that's the main problem. The cluster, if I well remember, when Jan started the cluster, it was not for conflict, no? Jan started because there was a major problems in terms of tsunami, right? And then you continue to apply the things everywhere, because everybody said, oh, great, we found out the system. I know we always willing to have one size fits all. Shit, it doesn't work, right? So it's more about that. And here I have a problem because we continue to push the cluster system to try to work. I mean, look at something less sophisticated than Syria, but as complex. Congo, last week, what happened with the cluster system? You can tell me who was in Goma? Who was able to do things? And that's not a criticism against the cluster, is how do you think a cluster system, and here I'm really parling with my friends of the UN, can work when you are integrated into a mission which at the same time is protecting one side of the conflict? I mean, this is crazy, frankly. And you put the people in the wrong position. You're asking them to do things, frankly, they will never be able to deliver. So my message would be, I think the cluster, you should make them work. But please, you should help then Valérie to be much more serious and to ask the UN agency to be serious about it. That would be good to start with, right? If I may, right? On some key context. I think there are key contexts where the cluster makes a lot of sense. It would be good to be slightly less bureaucratic, but that's okay. It's not only a cluster, it could be also us. But I think we should be very careful to believe that this model that we like, we know, is the model that you can apply everything. And here, that's my message, not more. What I will say to Valérie, I told her already, Valérie has said, you know, the agenda starts at 9 o'clock until 5 o'clock. And it's really, I'm serious about it. We have 10 minutes on updates on operation. And then all the rest during our discussion, you know what it is? Transformative agenda. We spent 3 hours, happy about it. Then we have a long discussion on resilience, good. And then we finish by the program of next year. And I'm not joking, this is serious, right? And my message to Valérie, and it's a positive message, says, hey, you know what would be good? Is we have all the senior people here around the table. Can we just spend 2 hours on, you know, let's look what happens last time we met. Let's Mali, Syria, or we could Congo. Not say wrong, right, but where are we quickly? What are the issues? Do we have collectively something to work on? What is our worry? Syria, for example, the UN, no choice. I know they are talking, of course, some of the UN now. Do they have to move out from a Syrian-led or government-led operation to something different? Okay, but let's discuss it. Great. It's a great place. It's really, you have nice people around the table. Now, at the ICSC, what do we want to do? Oh, we have the response. We will bring Jan Egeland, you know? So he will develop a new coordination system for us. No, more seriously, no, I was also my message to you was also say it's not just about the cluster. It's about the deregulation and the impact. And some of the impact is also affecting us, the Red Cross, Red Crescent. Of course, it's not a surprise. I mean, it's very clear that some Red Cross and some Red Crescent society are in a different situation than they were 10 years ago. The big news for us in Red Cross, Red Crescent is national societies are most of the time in a position today to decide with whom they want to partner. 10 years ago, no. Today they can decide. Maybe ICSC, maybe WFP, maybe both, right? That is something new. And the way, and I think in a way it's positive. It's very positive when it's about Kenya. You have a fantastic national society there. 10 years ago, they were nowhere. Today, they can do the job. Not perfect, but they can do the job, and that's fantastic. It's a bit more complex when you have a country where national society is not very strong, but put at the center to try to control humanitarian aid, and they are in a situation much more difficult. So for us, we have to rethink that. I cannot just, I have to adapt. We have to adapt to this reality. There are very positive elements around that. But we as the ICRC, but also the Federation, we need to work differently in terms of capacity building, in terms of how do we connect what we propose on the table. That's very important. And it's happening now. If I look at all the big operations, if you look at the 10 most big operations for the ICRC, 7 out of 10, the National Red Cross or Red Crescent is totally central. Sometimes for good reason, because we want that, because they are very important. But most of the time also because they have been imposed at the center. And that's quite an interesting challenge for us. You're right about the diversity, and I'm sorry, my message, maybe that's a call in 20 years, I don't know, when we look at history. My message is, what I think we should do, what unite us, is we should certainly, at least humanitarian, professional humanitarian, we can discuss what problem, is we should agree that impartiality should really be the backbone. It's not the only one, but it should be the backbone of what we do. And it should distinguish us from other doing humanitarian or relief. And maybe we should redevelop what humanitarian means. maybe we should maybe rediscuss, because today you can apply humanitarian to everywhere. I'm of the absolute opinion that an army needs to do relief work. Really, that's their job. Is it humanitarian? Yes, of course, you can say it's helping people, okay. But is it really always impartial? I'm not sure about that. And by the way, it's maybe not the role of the army to be impartial, maybe, but it's our role. Private sectors, yes, welcome. Maybe if I partner with the private sector, yes, then I need to make sure that this partnership at least will help me to be impartial and not be in tensions with that. But do I want to have private sectors moving into being impartial? I received an offer about Syria from a private security company proposing me to have medics being sent in Syria with few helicopters and few guns to help things happening. It was interesting, by the way. But their response was in no way impartial. But I didn't expect them to be impartial. Then do I want to pal with them? That's another story, right? So you agree, I would say, I would not impose, it's not a question of imposing, but at least us, the humanitarian so-called, the landscape, we should at least agree, which seems to me the basic, on impartiality. We can agree on impartial humanity, let's say, because we own this principle, we know them. But it's time for us to unpack it a little bit. In order also for us maybe to have a bit tougher discussion among us. Because one thing which is amazing in this, we speak very little result, we don't speak so much among us on what has worked or not. We should be slightly more challenging on that. That's, I think, will help us.
Couldn't agree more. We've gone over time. I see a lot of hands. I don't know if people have appetite. I'm happy to extend by another 10 minutes. Looks like it. Are you all right with that? Yeah, okay. I also have a barrage of questions that have come online. I'll take 2 or 3 from the audience. I think there's a hand at the back. Is it Sean?
Hello. Jill Hart, ODI Communications Director. I'd like to ask you what you meant when you said yes to sanctions. From a layperson's perspective, there always seems to be a workaround for sanctions. So if you'd like to sort of explain what you meant by that, that would be very helpful. Thank you.
Hello, Eve. My name is Sean Lowry. I'm from the Consortium of British Humanitarian Agencies. My question is about enablers of impartiality. Probably the reason why you feel the most affinity to MSF is because 80% of their funding is private. And the multi-mandate agencies have drifted into this service delivery relationship with government donors that makes it very difficult for them to be independent. So I just wonder, I'm curious about your view about whether the landscape, as you call it, would be better served by more independence of multi-mandate NGOs.
Thanks. And one last one at the front here.
Hey, hi. Thanks. No, it's okay. I haven't jumped in.
Anyway, I'll be really quick so you can ask a question as well. My name is Suzanne Jaspers. I'm at Bristol University. I used to be with HPG. Now I'm doing a PhD on the history of food aid in Sudan. Yes, I was interested in your story about the hack commissioner. I guess my main question is really, in countries like Sudan, Somalia, you've had, in my case, food aid for 50 years, humanitarian assistance for at least 30, maybe 40 years. To what extent is it still possible to be impartial after that period of time when food aid or any form of humanitarian assistance has really merged with every aspect of society? I had something else, but I'll leave that so I can pass it on to my colleague.
Okay, Jean-Michel from ACF. A quick question, and you mentioned that people are rating NGOs, but it seems also that there is a new initiative from NGOs trying to rate themselves and thinking that quality can be improved by certifying NGOs. First, my question is that as you are part, this initiative is coming from SHCR, do you support it and do you think that it's going to bring quality? And if it is the case, do you think that the RCRC and the UN should also be certified?
Thanks. And one last question amongst the many that have come from the online audience. I'll just pick one that's come via Twitter, actually, from Paul Harvey of Humanitarian Outcomes. Do you think the GHD initiative is still useful 10 years on, the Good Humanitarian Donorship Initiative? And how should donors reconcile the commitments to good humanitarian donorship with fragile states principles, New Deal and Paris principles. Just so. And this is one to end.
I should have a right to select the question. I found
You can address the ones if you like.
I'm sorry. I'm slightly aware of. I hope you would also pardon me, because that's also part of the. I can imagine of the of today is being short. Sometimes there are some shortcuts. I won't be able to answer. So on sanction, very good question, because I have another meaning about sanction. For me, was in fact, if you do a war crime, for example, you're punished. Right. That's the point. It was not about UN sanction, for example, in a country. I'm a very strong opinion that sanctions doesn't at all, the kind of sanction, economic sanction, let's say, on a country. We've seen that over time, over and over time, that doesn't help. And that's my very personal opinion, is in most of the cases what economic sanction does, it's very clear, it's very useful. In fact, it really put a lot of pressure on the population, we know, on the most vulnerable people. And it absolutely doesn't help to change government, because normally when you do economic sanction, normally you have a very clear agenda. It doesn't help. Look at Iran. Right now, I think what is happening right now with the sanction over Iran is suddenly, in terms of humanitarian perspective, that's suddenly not the right way to approach. My message about sanction was much more when you do a war crime, as an example, or breach of financial, that there is a sanction. And yes, I'm in favor of justice. It's, by the way, problematic for the ICSC as for you sometimes to claim that, because still in the field, people also talking about Sudan and other places, some look us as an organization which will then not only support but also give evidence to people to go to justice. And it's a complex element. But yes, ICSC, in terms of developing IHL, in terms of really contributing to the birth of the International Penal Court, yes, we are absolutely of the opinion, and I'm of the opinion that sanctions should be there. I do believe that when you start to be under pressure as a leader or as a person who has done that, it changes your behavior. I'm of a very strong opinion on that one. So sorry, maybe I was wrong on sanction, but that's fine. Very clear. It was interesting what you said about MSF and independence. I have a slight disagreement, because I know organizations who are private or have a lot of fundraising from private sources who are not that impartial, independent on the ground. So I wouldn't make the link. What I found, or at least not automatically, what is interesting with MSF, for the things I know about MSF, is their choice, their take regarding profit fundraising is a very interesting one. But what they've done is, at least my understanding is, they have developed a tactic. They're not the only one, but they have a tactic with a large base of donors contributing for few amount of money in order to have non-earmarked money. And here my message is, if you look at funding, the most interesting element where we have a combination with MSF, of course there are also vision and also way to approach things. But I think the other things is really the non-earmarking money. And this is the big differences. I would really distinguish not private or public. I would really distinguish organizations who have 30 or 40, maybe more, but at least 30% of non-earmarked budget. And then you suddenly have organizations who have the ability to use this means where they want to use it. That's ICSC, for example. And we are financed by government, so you can discuss that. But we have at least 30 to 35% of our budget totally non-earmarked. But this is absolutely at the base of our model. Otherwise, it won't work, right? This is what allows us to be in Kyrgyzstan as well in Syria. Otherwise, it allows us to do detention work. Otherwise, nobody will support it. In Afghanistan, I would say it allows also MSF then to have the ability to go where they want, right? And to take risk before asking for the money and for. So, if there is something I would, in terms of analysis, my sense would be more on the non-earmarking, which I think would be more interesting. On Sudan and Somalia, the food, oh my God, that's a very complicated question. I'm happy to drink with you afterwards, to have a drink. No, because, yes, you're right. I was just in Somalia a few days ago. Yeah, okay, you can say. I think the other issues, I think I would say you would have to look at the society and how much the society evolved, and then also how much the humanitarian. I don't think the humanitarian is something flat, especially in Sudan or in Somalia. There were so different moments where we played different, where the humanitarian actions, for example, was so central to the society versus moments where we were less central. Does that prevent the humanitarian to be impartial? I'm not sure about that. I wouldn't say no. I'm not sure about that. I would distinguish that. I would say it creates another type of relationship. Certainly it creates some of us, and maybe our own then staff. Some of our staff also maybe are in a difficult situation, maybe which sometimes prevent them to be impartial. I'm not sure. Frankly, I'm not sure. I don't have a clear answer on that one. My intuition would say no. I don't think why it would prevent us to be impartial over time. It will maybe be more challenging. I think there are issues about perceptions. There are issues about expectation. Yes, absolutely. Which then is very complicated to deal with it. In Sudan, it's complicated, but Somalia is very complicated to deal. You're close to a man who has spent quite a lot of time in Somalia at a time where ICSE was absolutely central to a lot of Somali. Today, it will be very different. So it's more the relationship between society and different elements and the organization, and then the expectation. Maybe that's where I would look at. I'm not sure if I answered well your question, but so far that's where I will look at it. On good on the rating and certification. Oh, that's a big story. I mean, this is I'm not sure I want to go. My message is the two things. Rating will happen, right? No question. And even if we start to rate ourselves, so-called customer will rate us. No doubt it will happen. No discussion. Now the point is, I think we have an interest, a minimum of interest, to look slightly on how do we want ourselves talk about quality, have a bit of a discussion among us. I think we should try to find a way. Now, I'm not sure certification is a perfect answer because, frankly speaking, people have a totally different agenda about certification. Some people about certification, their main objective is, I don't want to have in a health cluster 400 NGOs. So I want only to have the 20 accounts. So there is a lot of people who are looking into that. There are other people who are saying, my God, if we don't start ourselves to certify, others will certify ourselves. So we have to work around that. So the initiative at the SCHR and the perspective of ICSE is, as always, it's better to be in to influence than to look from the outside and hoping that nothing will affect us. It will affect us. So we have to have a say. My only message, and this is constantly what I discuss with my colleague of SCHR, so I'll take an example of Afghanistan. We can take, who then, at the end of the day, will certify us? Okay, we have a certified body, it's great. But then who decides, you know? And people say, government. Yeah, say, and in Afghanistan, are the Taliban also part of it? I mean, we have to think slightly. I mean, I have a sense today still the thinking on certification sometimes, surprisingly, is very, very narrow. So it's a time, maybe we won't come with a perfect certification model, but at least we need to bring within the thinking something a bit more sophisticated, find a way. And then there is a big issue, certification to whom? To the very professional big one or to everybody? What is the minimum? Do we, for example, link it with impartiality only? I think there is a lot of questions. We need to be part of this discussion. That's the view I have, ICSE. We need to contribute. We cannot just look at, says, okay, you want to. And now, if one day there is a model, of course, we'll have to be certified. No choice. Now, my sense is it's already, I mean, we have to look at differently certification. It's not only about organization. Today, there are processes which are certified. People will ask more and more that we have processes, which is already the case. ISO processes. In my organization, from all my financial process are international standards from industry, nothing to do with humanitarian. And that's what will happen. It will happen on HR. I have no doubt on that. It's already the case. It will happen more on. So I think we will have a melange, a mixture of elements. So it doesn't move very quickly, I know, but I have no doubt on that one that we need to remain engaged and try to find a way. Last, I was a bit lost with the question. There were so many elements. Can I just say, yes, I know the good ownership initiative. I found that fantastic, but I'm not that impressed of where they are right now, if I may. What I would find interesting, to move a little bit beyond the good donorship, what I would find interesting is some of the donor, which are extremely important. I would find interesting that they are a little bit more, that they maybe, I know it's easy to say that, but they start to maybe find a way to have discussions with us on what are their requirements towards us in terms of result, evaluation, whatever. And I more and more understand very well that donors, they need to be able to talk to their parliament, to their citizen. The pressure is bigger. They need to show result. They need to, and they bring now value for money. And I think that's okay. I understand, and I really understand that. I'm just not sure then that works, right? So what I would find interesting, my expectation is that I would find more interesting that as a group, not as collective, as unique, but as a group that we can build something. And I know it's complicated, but again, talking about common language, I think donors would have an interest to have a minimum of common language among ourselves in terms of of access, for example. I'm still amazed that we are trying to count how much cost is logistic, whatever, but we never talk about the important things. So I would find interesting that good ownership and governments also, for example, they really assess access, for example. Who is really there? Who works directly or with a partner? I'm not saying wrong, right, but that would be interesting. So I think there are a possibility where, in terms of key success factors, if you want to talk about what is really necessary for an organization to function, that I think we could do that. So far, frankly, we are far away from that. And my worry, to be honest with you, is I meet more and more ministers at top level who are less and less taking decision based on evidence brought by their own machine, right? So you have a lot of people working hard, by the way, a lot of respect, humanitarian professional in government office or whatever. They produce a lot of evaluation. By the way, they have a tendency these days to also push us a little bit, their accountability on our side to make sure that we do the report, but that's fine. But I meet more and more ministers, I don't know if you have the same experience, that are basing their funding, their discussion with us on that. I don't know if they did that ever, but less so, right? And that's something we need to know. I'm a very strong believer that we need evaluation, we need monitoring. Let's be serious about that. But the intensity. So if there is a call, I know, and I don't perfectly answer on that, but the good ownership initiative that focus a little bit on having one on two parameters that we collectively will be pushed, that would be very helpful in terms of helping us to move in the right direction.
Yves, thank you very much, first of all, for taking time out of your very busy schedule to be with us tonight, and for stimulating, I think, such an interesting discussion, very engaged, as you can see, and for being so open and frank in your reflections and your answers. I really appreciate that. I think we could have not really wished for a better start to our lecture series. Thank you very much. Please join me in thanking you.